The airport was a chaotic symphony of hurried footsteps, rolling suitcases, and echoing announcements. It was loud, impatient, and utterly unforgiving. And standing alone near Gate 27 was a man who seemed to have everything the world could offer, except the one thing he needed most right now: time. His name was Daniel Cole, the celebrated CEO of a tech giant, a man whose net worth was counted in the millions and whose calendar was scheduled down to the very last second. His life was a tightly wound clock, and in exactly 3 minutes, his flight was scheduled to take off, with or without him. He started to run. It wasn't the desperate sprint of someone who was merely late. It was the defiant charge of a man who believed that time, like everything else in his life, could be bent to his will. His assistant trailed behind him, shouting muffled apologies and updates. A security guard waved him aside with a look of practiced indifference. He finally reached the gate, his chest heaving, only to see the agent shaking her head slowly. The jet bridge doors were sealed. The flight was gone. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Daniel Cole stood completely still. He had absolutely nowhere to go. No urgent meetings to chair, no demanding investors to placate, no empire to control. There was just the deafening silence of his own halted momentum. He slumped down at a small table in the corner of a quiet terminal cafe, the adrenaline giving way to a hollow exhaustion. He loosened his expensive tie, the knot feeling like a noose, and let out a long, frustrated sigh. That's when a calm, unexpected voice cut through his internal turmoil. Missed flights hurt more than breakups, don't they? Daniel looked up, startled. The woman who spoke wasn't dressed like anyone he would normally notice. She wore simple clothes, held a worn paperback book in her hand, and her eyes were strikingly calm. Her name, he would soon learn, was Lena. She was waiting for a delayed flight, but there was no trace of frustration in her posture, no anxious glances at the departure board, just a quiet, settled peace. Their conversation started politely, with the usual small talk strangers use to fill empty space. But soon, it deepened into something surprisingly honest. Daniel found himself talking about his world, a relentless cycle of deadlines, growth charts, and the immense, crushing pressure to never, ever slow down. He spoke of winning, of conquering, of always moving forward. Lena listened patiently, her gaze never wavering. When he finished, she spoke of her own life, a path marked by missed chances, unexpected detours, and the courage to start over. She talked about choosing life over the illusion of speed. Then, she said something that landed like a stone in the placid water of his carefully constructed world: some people win the race and still miss the entire journey. Daniel managed a short, dismissive laugh, but the words echoed in his mind, refusing to be ignored. The hours melted away. What was supposed to be a frustrating layover transformed into an unplanned pause from his own life. They walked through the vast, impersonal terminal, which now felt like a world of its own. They shared a simple meal from a food court vendor and talked about dreams Daniel had buried under layers of ambition and responsibility years ago. He learned that Lena had once dreamed of being an architect, designing spaces that made people feel at home. Life had redirected her path, but she spoke of it without a hint of resentment or regret. It was then that a painful realization dawned on Daniel. He had achieved everything he had relentlessly worked for, but in the process, he had lost touch with everything he once truly wanted. Eventually, the announcement for her delayed flight finally came. Her boarding group was called. Lena stood up, a gentle smile on her face. "Take care of yourself, CEO," she said softly. In a moment of uncharacteristic impulse, Daniel asked for her number. He wanted to continue this conversation, to hold on to this feeling of clarity. She hesitated for just a second, a thoughtful look in her eyes. "I think some meetings aren't meant to be repeated," she replied gently. "They're just meant to happen." And with that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd heading towards the gate. Just like that, she was gone. Daniel boarded the next available flight, the seat next to him feeling profoundly empty. But something fundamental inside him had shifted. The man who walked off that plane was not the same one who had run through the terminal hours earlier. In the weeks and months that followed, The change was tangible. He started canceling unnecessary meetings, delegating tasks he once hoarded. He took his first real vacation in over a decade, a trip with no agenda and no phone calls. He began the slow, careful work of rebuilding the personal relationships he had neglected in his relentless climb to the top. And through it all, he thought of Lena. Often, the memory of their conversation was a constant, gentle reminder of the journey he had almost missed. Months later, Daniel was in a different city, sitting in a quiet bookstore cafe, enjoying a rare moment of peace. He was reading, not a business report, but a novel. That's when he heard a familiar, musical voice from behind him. "Miss Flight still hurt, you know." His heart skipped a beat. He turned around slowly. It was Lena. She looked exactly the same, with that same calming presence and a book in her hand. This time, a genuine, unforced smile spread across Daniel's face. "Maybe," he said, his voice steady. "Or maybe some delays are just destiny." This time, she didn't walk away. She sat down. Because sometimes, the best things in life don't arrive on a schedule. They don't show up on time. They arrive exactly when you're finally ready to stop running.